Hi guys, the purpose of this video is to draw your attention to an old video from late 2020, and it's a video about the COVID-19 vaccine research by the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, and it goes for a little bit over an hour, and I think it's well worth watching the entirety of it because they actually, the so-called experts, immunologists and whatever that talk throughout this presentation, clearly at this stage haven't sort of picked up on the concerns or aren't really in a defensive mode about the vaccine. So they actually raise a lot of genuine issues about the vaccine and are quite reasonable about it compared to today, for example, where we know that they've effectively been gaslighting for the last 2 years as injuries have come to light. But in particular, I want to draw your attention to 53 minutes in and 45 seconds, where one guy talks about autoimmune disease needs to be watched, and he goes, it may have a longer latency. So it's interesting that autoimmune disease and also vaccine-associated enhanced disease syndrome is raised around this point of time in the clip. So, it's interesting. These people did know that long-term autoimmune problems could happen and were a risk from the vaccine, despite the fact that the TGA and the Department of Health constantly disregard that risk or try and gaslight that risk.
The adverse events of particular interest here, particularly the vaccine-associated enhanced antibody disease that was mentioned before, if that is to occur, it is likely to occur within 2 months or 3 months of vaccination. And so, of course, later onset concerns about new onset autoimmune disease or other things may have a much longer latency, and of course will be a concern for ongoing pharmacovigilance.
The other thing is also worth watching from about 16 minutes onwards, where they mentioned that 3 of the 4 sponsors signed an open letter where they wanted the vaccines to be properly tested before being fully approved. I find that's a very interesting one.
And what these vaccines will be likely approved under in the US for the FDA is an emergency use authorization, which is an appropriate vehicle used, if used properly, to rapidly license these vaccines. Now, this is not the same as a standard licensure, and a whole variety of regulatory mechanisms have been utilised to make sure that full evaluation of these vaccines is done as quickly as possible. And it's also important to note that the 3 of the 4 sponsors of the vaccines that are planned to be implemented in Australia have signed an open letter saying that they wish their vaccines to have a proper and full evaluation prior to EUA authorization in response to concerns around whether there would be political pressure brought to bear.
And there's another one too that, back around the 53-minute mark, where the guy encourages the health department to have both active and passive surveillance, and for people to actually be, people from the TGA, I assume, or the Department of Health, to actually be in the emergency departments to actually monitor adverse events of special interest. Now, of course, we know that never actually happened. And as a matter of fact, it was quite the opposite. Not only did they not monitor these events, they actually gaslighted these events. So anyway, I'll put the link in the comment section below. It goes for a little bit over an hour. It's dated to late 2020, I think around October 2020, before the rollout of the vaccines occurred. But it's interesting to go back and just see how these professionals, before the vaccines became politicised, were actually concerned about various risks of the vaccine and the way the vaccines were going to be rolled out.
New Zealand introduced their men's B vaccine for their endemic or hyperendemic meningococcal B infection that affected particularly young adults down to children. They had a superb program of enhancing of enhancing the data systems with both active and passive monitoring of events, hiring staff to work in emergency departments and so on for particular events of special interest and so forth. And I'm hoping in Australia that we'll similarly ramp up, as Annalise was mentioning before, ramp up all of our systems to be absolutely sure we have this really very energised linked data system for safety monitoring.
Authorised G. Rennick, LNP Chermside.